Welcome to another episode of Revolutionaries, brought to you by EmpoweRx. My name is MK Bryan, the founder and CEO of EmpoweRx, and I am thrilled to present our guest, Hank Balch, to the audience today so that he can tell his story and share with us what makes him a revolutionary. Hank, welcome to the show. Thanks for being with us.
It's an honor to be here, and you got me interested with the revolutionary title. I like to think of myself as a revolutionary, so really looking forward to the conversation today.
Wonderful. And I would say that, Hank, you are a revolutionary. It's one of the reasons I was really excited to get connected with you and share, your mission and all the work, the great work that you're doing in the healthcare space with the audience. So let's dive in. So tell us about your journey. I not to give it away, but you were in the sterile processing field
Okay.
and have a lot of great background clinically. And then your journey is taking you into the entrepreneurial side of healthcare and educational. I think and advocacy would be some of the other things that I think would fit a great description of what you're doing. So tell us about that journey. Where did you come from? Where are you at? And where are you going?
Okay. Yeah, sure. I I'll start. Sterile processing is an interesting entrance into healthcare because it's one of the few clinical positions that does not require any standardized training or any degree. Uh, and so a lot of us, including myself, just kind of stumbled in, not necessarily knowing where we're going to go with this or what we're going to do long term in sterile processing. But I was in grad school and I was looking for a job with some better benefits in the grocery store that I was working at before and with some shift work. And
Mhm.
I just happened to know a guy who knew a guy, and they're hiring an SPD. And went in and I learned what it is that I actually signed up for. Uh, Um, and then I got bit by the bug, as they say, and really fell
Mhm.
in love with the industry and the clinical side of surgery, being able to be so close to surgery
Right.
without having to be a doctor myself and without having to go to nursing school myself,
Yeah.
but still be right there in and through our instruments, that we're
Mhm.
processing. So I started that in 2009. In 2013, I got my first opportunity to manage a department in Kentucky. Um, Really quickly after I took that role in 2013, we started seeing some momentum in our department and a lot of growth. We ended up winning a couple of industry awards. We got published in some magazines, and that's when I
Oh, cool.
really started falling in love with doing things in the industry at scale. Making an impact, really bringing the ideas forward that we had some success with in our own departments and our health systems. Um, so fast forward to 2017, I was nominated and ran for president of the National Trade Organization in sterile processing. It was a long, hard fought election, and I lost.
Oh,
So
wow.
I'm sitting there in the summer 2017, just thinking, well, that's not the direction that I'm going after all.
Mhm.
Now what? Um, Along the way, in the years leading up to 2017, I had begun blogging a lot and doing a lot of writing, specifically through LinkedIn regarding sterile processing and my opinions about how to make the industry better.
Mhm.
And I had caught the attention and the eye of a guy named Justin Poulin, who I did not know from Adam. And he reached out that summer of 2017 and said, Hank, I know, you were running for presidency, you didn't get that. I don't know if you've ever thought about doing a podcast about SPD, but would you be interested in it? And it's funny, if you go to our website, I took screenshots of the LinkedIn conversation that happened back in 2017. You can see the conversation that ended up
Oh,
founding our
cool.
company. Um, but yeah, so he asked me that. About a month and a half later, we had launched a company called Beyond Clean that was about podcasting about SPD, but it became a full scale entity with online training, virtual events, webinars, YouTube content, blogs, articles, CEs, live events. Um, and that's kind of where we are today. Yeah.
Wonderful. I love this story for a couple things that really stand out to me. You got those successes that kind of, pulled you in a different direction when you were working in the department and leadership. And then it was the failure or not
Right.
getting the president position at the trade organization that propelled you in another direction. And this is something, when we look at entrepreneurship, which is obviously a big part of what we talk about in EmpoweRx, I'm constantly talking about failing forward and reshifting the way that we think about failure. I don't even really use the word failure like in my mind or vocabulary, because
Right.
it's just a shift, it's just a change, it's just a lesson. It's just something that's going to put us on another trajectory. Um, so I love that that's kind of part of that story. And the other piece that I really love, another thing I'm always advocating in our programs and with our community, is to get involved in LinkedIn.
Mm.
I think it's the best social media platform. They all are great. They all have a great, use, right? But I
Right.
just love the content and the connections that you can make on LinkedIn. That's where we met. That's where I've
Right.
met other people that have been on their podcast or they've been on ours and just connected with different ideas. And I just really love that. Those two pieces of that story really stood out to me as just being so fantastic and really kind of speak to some of the things that I think are key in entrepreneurship is reframing the way you think about failure, and then also finding really good outlets to network that are productive on social media.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I am probably one of the biggest LinkedIn nerds out there, and not for the reasons that a lot of folks get on LinkedIn. Like, I think LinkedIn is viewed as a great place to sell, and it
Mm,
is,
sure.
but it's an even better place to sell yourself and your ideas and your personal brand. And I am so very thankful. Again, I started doing that, back in 2013, probably. And it wasn't until 2017 that I really needed my LinkedIn network, because that was a guy, who reached out
Hmm.
and said, "Hey, like, I've been following you on LinkedIn. Let's do this." And just imagine, this is what I tell our clients and our partners, because we do a lot of training around social media. Uh, and the phrase I like to use is, when you need a LinkedIn network, it's too late to start building one.
Oh,
Um, and so it's
brilliant.
really, really
Yep.
important, if you've got any plans entrepreneurship wise that could leverage a broad clinical network, you need to start building that today, long before you get to the point that you launch your company or your business, and then you're ready to say, "Hey, I want all 20 of my followers to know this." Like, by that time, you want all 2,000 or 20,000 of your followers to know it. So that's really, really important.
Sure. And when I think about that, one of the things that I always found to be helpful in business and networking is to just really sincerely look to network and learn, right? It's
Right.
because so if you're like, oh, I have this idea now that I want to sell, like I'm going to sell my business, now I want to build this network.
Right.
But if you really take that approach of being a lifetime learner, right? Like, and that's really what I love about LinkedIn is I've learned so much like from your posts and all this, I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't know that, and
Right.
it's broadened my knowledge base, which is so amazing for personal growth. And at the same time, you're building this amazing professional network. So I really think that intention is important. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, coming for the right reasons. And the only thing I'll add to what you said is, the right reasons will get you there, but they won't get you all the way there.
Okay.
It's also the right frequency, i- being present and staying present. And that's the other thing is, like, folks feel like they come to LinkedIn and they're like all about it, for 3 weeks. And they're like, "Oh, well, that didn't work." Well, it's not built to work like a Roman candle. It's built to be like a sparkler. Like, you got to be there. You got to give it the time to continue to build. And I know, like, just talking about the network and kind of being there for sincere reasons. I've got people on my Christmas card list now, just because we've been connected so many years through LinkedIn, and there's been so many opportunities and synergies and conversations to support each other. It ended up meeting folks when I traveled overseas. So I speak at various conferences, like, "Hey, you're on LinkedIn. Like, we've been chatting," and it's real. This is the other thing, maybe too, that I'll add. Um, on any social media platform, it's really easy to forget that there's people behind the profiles and
Right.
to treat them like I'm just talking to a bunch of bots or computers or, whatever. But like every single profile and every follower and everything that you connect with, like these are real people, real clinicians, if you're in the healthcare space,
Mm-hmm.
that can go back to their hospitals and do things differently based on what they hear from you or what you turn them on to, if it's a new podcast or new webinar. And
Right.
so it's really impacting in a really tangible way beyond just the metrics of the likes and the shares and the engagements.
Right. Wonderful point. Absolutely. The human aspect of it. I think that's really great to point out. Thanks. So let's talk about the transition. So because I could talk about social media probably we could do a whole episode on that because and you're so great at it. It's awesome just to watch you work and kind of take some leads from what you're doing. But when we're talking about your transition from into from the bedside clinician, I always say bedside, but I know you were in the OR sterile processing department, but into that out of that clinical role into the entrepreneur role, what would you say were your biggest challenges? And then also, I would say, what were the biggest strengths that you pulled from that previous experience that helped you be successful?
I think the first challenge is the one that everyone's probably really familiar with. It was the fear of going from what is a regular paycheck with
Hmm.
benefits and structure and clarity and even a career growth opportunity, not, very clear what the ladder looks like within healthcare,
Hmm.
to hope this works and there's no one else that's going to make it work besides me. Uh,
Hmm.
and so it's a lot of fear. It's a lot of betting on yourself. And if you've never bet on yourself before, that could be even more fear because you're like, do I have what it takes to do this in this way, even though I may know other people, who have done it before, but that
Right.
doesn't matter because this is my thing now and it's all
Hmm.
me. Um, I will say though, one of the lessons learned or the strengths, maybe kind of looking back and why I think my transition was as successful as it was, is I didn't do it by myself. Like I said, in that summer, the the reach out that I got from Justin, who ended up being my co-founder,
Hmm.
was critical to me because he was very complimentary in a lot of the places where I was weak in my skill set as an entrepreneur. And
Hmm.
likewise, I was very strong in areas that he wasn't as strong at. And together, we were able to go much farther, much faster than I ever would have been able to do by myself.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so that just that community mindset, like I think folks feel like if they're going entrepreneurship, it's got to be by yourself. You got to be alone, and
Right.
that's not really the case.
Hmm. So that's interesting to me because you had meant, you shared that you met on LinkedIn. And so did you guys meet in person? Did you
No,
vet each other out? Like how did you know you had that synergy? How could you trust that? Like what was
yeah.
that process like?
Yeah, go back to LinkedIn, like it's a real network, and
Mm.
what's really special about it is you can see mutual connections on LinkedIn when you connect with people. You can't really
Mhm.
see that in real life. You meet someone at a conference and like you get to talking to them and try to figure out if you know mutual people, but you're not really sure. But on LinkedIn, like you can see immediately, oh, we know 20 people. I
Mhm.
can do 20 phone calls real quick and get a really good read on who this person is. But yeah, we like to tell the story. Justin and I did not meet until the following April after we launched the company in August. And so we had begun doing podcasts together, doing content together. Um, and it, it probably took a little bit more faith on my side because Justin wasn't as active on LinkedIn content wise as I was. So he knew a lot
Mhm.
more about me than I knew about him. But because of the mutual connections, I was able to reach out to and get a real good feeling that this is someone that I would want to work with. Now, skill set wise, as you know, sometimes it just takes working together for long enough to figure
Right.
out if we are really complementary or not. And as the business grew, we've had folks on the team that were awesome people, but for one reason or another, they weren't really built
Mhm.
for the vision we had as the team or the structure of the team. and that's okay to figure that out as well,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So wonderful. So you got the team, you've started, you brought those strengths and you just went forward, felt the fear and did it anyway, right?
Right?
And that's kind of the way you got to dive in. Have I always say, have a little faith in yourself, right? And don't be afraid to find out how resilient you really are when you test yourself,
Right.
which I think is important. So, here you are, successful with the business. What's your mission? What's driving you? Because I personally think that what's driving the mission and the entrepreneurship is fuel for me, right? It helps me every day when I have that strong connection to my mission. So tell us a little bit about what that is for you and your team.
Yeah, what's unique about the team and platform company that we have, we talk to a lot of entrepreneurs as well. And so I get to hear these stories on the other side of the equation. And um, it's a very similar, and I think this is special to healthcare in some ways, but clinicians can get very frustrated with the system
Yes.
and get very tired. I was just talking to a guy this afternoon, get very tired of just hitting your head against the wall, and you feel like no one's listening, no one wants to change, and then feeling in some sense kind of like hopeless or powerless.
Hmm.
Um, and coming out of that into the space to innovate, but bringing that frustration with you and not forgetting how hard it was to change the course of the ship and and to break down the status quo and to stop doing the same thing again and again and again and expecting different results. That does drive that drives me, that drives us as a team, because there is so much status quo still left in healthcare to be
Yeah.
torn down and replaced with something that's positive. Um, and that's I use the term revolutionary a lot as well, and the term disruption, but I try to be intentional that it's a constructive type of revolution. It's a constructive type of disruption. We're not just there to blow up the status quo. We're there to say, hey, let's stop doing it the way that we know doesn't work, and then at least be willing to try new ways until we find those things that work. And it's been an absolute pleasure over the last 6 years of our company, to just wake up every morning and get to do that for a day job.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I can completely relate. And I know the folks in our audience can relate because, we're in the staffing vertical, which is just, I mean, I've had people ghosting me for a year, and I just keep going back. I mean, it's nothing personal. We
Right.
have the value, we have the things. It's just about having the conversation. So it is incredibly frustrating. And I've seen many of the folks in our community just get so frustrated with it. It's just so illogical, it seems at
Hmm.
times. And
Right.
I'm like, well, that's healthcare. That's why we're trying to change it, right?
That's
That's why
right.
we're trying to give you a voice. So I think that's wonderful and completely makes sense. So, thinking about all those things and all that knowledge that you have, what's some advice that you have to, clinical folks that are looking to start, we're doing small businesses, but doesn't matter what they want to do. I've found that a lot of folks that kind of go through our program, they're doing the staffing stuff, but they're also doing other things, like a
Hmm.
medical device or whatever they do, some other passion. So I feel like it kind of enables them to kind of grow, right, and kind of blossom. So, our entrepreneurs, what advice would you give them as they're thinking about it or starting or maybe frustrated today or whatever
Right.
they're at on their journey?
Well, I would go back to something that we've already mentioned, which is the social media piece, and particularly that LinkedIn, that branding is get yourself out there today on a
Mhm.
regular basis to be positioning who you are, what you're passionate about. If you specifically nerd out about specific topics within your niche.
Mhm.
So even like if you're an operating room nurse, that doesn't mean that you have to know everything about the OR. But find those one areas or two areas where you just cannot get enough of the content and the education, the insight around it, and then go deep. So that'd be number one, to get out there, go deep into that category, become the person that everyone knows when they log into LinkedIn. They're going to see Susie, and she won't be quiet about hospital curtains because she's just obsessed with hospital curtains and the contamination risk and everything, right?
Right.
Two, and I'm going to butcher this paraphrase by Mark Twain, but he basically said something like, if you got to eat a frog, it's best to do it first thing in the morning. And I think entrepreneurs, the ones I've talked to, and I've mentored a number of folks too that want to get stuff going, it's a temptation to get really excited about the fun things about entrepreneurship, like, to spend hours and hours thinking about a company name and spend hundreds of dollars trying to build a website and, get business cards and get polos, get bumper stickers without ever sitting down and saying, how am I going to actually make money with this company? Do I have any potential customers? What's the structure of the business end look like? And so that's the frog. That's not the fun part, but that's the part that's going to really say, is this going to be successful for you or is it going to fail? And that's where all the stats around small businesses and why they fell within the first 5 years, just a crazy number statistic.
Yeah.
It's because folks often are not focusing on the things that are actually going to pay the bill. So I would say eat the frog. You can do all the fun stuff. Sure. And you can do it a lot longer if your business is actually viable and making money. So,
true.
Focus on the front end there.
So true. Great advice for sure.
Yeah. And if I can add maybe to a third piece of that puzzle, is don't be so committed to the concept that you're not willing to learn from those market responses. Like you said, like you don't like to use the word failure, but if you say, hey, I want to start this entity and this is what I want to address and this is the way that I want to address it. If you get out there and you're getting market signals that they don't want that, or you're not really willing to pay what you need to make that a viable option, you should still be listening to what they're telling you, because they may be telling you what they will pay for and what they will see value in. And if you're listening close enough and not so, tunnel vision on that one solution you came up with, you can immediately pivot into that new thing and be like, well, if that's what you want, I can do that too. Let's talk about that and let's get some revenue generating. So I think that's really important. Like we've done that again and again and again through my business. Like we realize, that service is not a winner. Let's kill it. And now let's launch a new one that we're sensing those market signals around.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know customer discovery is so key to being successful. And I think oftentimes, everybody kind of goes into a conversation with the gatekeeper or someone as a sales conversation. And I'm always like, just literally try to learn what they're thinking, right? You want to just discover, that way you can offer a solution. And we've certainly learned that, with my business for sure, because you have a thesis, but you have to test it, right? You have to make sure that it's going to work out. So I think that's amazing advice from a successful entrepreneur. Thanks for sharing all of that. So I guess kind of wrapping up, what are some final thoughts? I certainly want people to know where to find you. So we'll of course put all the links and all the gadgets in the context of the post. But I know you have a lot of things going on. So I'd love for you to just share briefly kind of all your projects and the areas that you're touching to help make a difference in healthcare.
Yeah. So I started my company again out of a little bit of frustration about the lack of resources in the industry. And I just said, well, instead of just sitting around complaining about it, maybe I'll try to go do something about it.
Love it.
And that has been the last 6 years of growth across all of our platforms, is creating podcasts, creating webinars, writing articles, doing live events, doing virtual events, even doing crazy things like publishing a music album about sterile processing. And we worked with couple of musicians and got like 6 or 7 different songs about SPD created and dropped last year. We've published puzzle books out there. I've got a children's book that's been waiting in the wings for way too long now that
Mhm.
I need to bring to life, all about SPD. So it's really a holistic approach to looking at the industry. And the phrase we use is to make it an industry that's worth loving. Because if you're going to commit, decades of your life to being an
Mhm.
operating room nurse or an ER nurse or a sterile processing technician, like
Mhm.
you should not only enjoy it as a career, but you should enjoy the culture of being those things. And so we try to build that through
Absolutely.
Beyond Clean for SPD. In 2021, we launched our second company called First Case, and that does the exact same thing, but in the perioperative space. Later on in 2021, we launched Power Supply that does the same thing in the healthcare supply chain space. And then our baby brand, well, I guess we got 2 baby brands. The smallest clinical brand is called Transmission Control, and that focuses on infection prevention.
Mhm.
But just a couple of months ago, as the time of this interview is happening, we launched a company called Healthcare HQ, and that's an advertising marketing arm that is really teaching vendors and manufacturers in the space how to creatively educate, inspire, and engage the clinical side and the decision maker to get them to pay attention to all the cool solutions, technologies, and services that are out there. That if we look around our hospital, we wouldn't have much of a hospital without supplies and services and technology. That would not be a very fun place to work. So we need those manufacturers helping us, but we need them to understand the way that we want to be helped and communicated with. And so that's what we're trying to do at Healthcare HQ.
Awesome. Wonderful. And, I just thought of something as I was listening to all these great projects that you have that are really helping. I think it's bringing the clinical voice to leadership, which I think is just so important. It's a big part of what we're trying to do as well, because I think it's key to do that for really good change, meaningful
Right.
change. Have you noticed a change like in the last 5 years I know you've been around about 6 years, you said, doing this, but have you noticed a shift in leadership listening more or potentially the other way, listening less? Kind of
Mhm.
what's the trend that you see?
Well, what social media has given us, and this is podcasting, this is articles, this is, the virtual conferences, it has really democratized that clinical voice that, in the past, if you wanted to get published, for instance,
Mhm.
you got a handful of potential like legit magazines in the industry, or you got clinical journals, research journals, but
Right.
that's it.
Mhm.
There's no real way to reach thousands and thousands of people at one time. Well, now with social media, even like TikTok, you can reach
Right.
7 million people on a little viral TikTok that's got a powerful message at that clinical level, speaking to hospital leadership, but also speaking to the public, to pressure hospital leadership, to think differently. And
Mhm.
those tools have not been around very long. TikTok was about
Right.
2020 when it really boomed, and you've got all these other platforms. Podcasting is another great example. So I think we're in definitely an upswing of now administrators can't ignore in the ways that they used to, and clinicians have many more tools to get their voice out in a productive fashion. Besides just going up the chain, they can also now go out into the industry and say, hey, as an industry, we got to fix this. It's not just my hospital.
Mm. Awesome. Wonderful point. Thanks so much for everything that you and your team are doing. I really appreciate it. Applaud you guys for doing it. And I really appreciate you taking time to share your journey with us today.
Yeah, it's an honor. And yeah, if anyone wants to connect with me, easiest way is to track me down on LinkedIn. I'm linkedin.com/in/sterile processing, and you can find me there. And I'd love to connect and talk more.
Awesome. Wonderful. And again, we'll make sure everybody has your contact information, Hank, and we'll look forward to staying connected with you and watching your journey and all the great progress that you make in the future. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.